Howard Finkel has passed away today. He was 69 years old. We do not know the cause of death yet, but it has been known for many years that he's been in very poor health. You can even see photos that are being posted on Twitter now by some stars. I believe Kevin Owens posted one in which a lot of the wrestlers went to go visit him, and he was in a wheelchair at that moment. So he was in poor health, and he was 69 years old, which is not super old, but it was a situation where this was almost expected. It really was. He kind of knew that we'd hear this day because there were so much stories about his health. But he was a great guy. He was just one of the nicest stars in the history of the business. And he was someone who always treated the fans well, always treated wrestlers well. They're just hearing stories of wrestlers talk about how much of a nice guy this was, how much of a gentleman he was, how much of a big heart he really had. And I'm sure if I've never got to meet him, but I'm sure if any fan met him, had any interaction with him when he signed his autograph, something like that, he was probably the nicest guy. This was a really, really great man. It's really sad. We have to go to his whole career to really pay tribute to him, where he started. And if you listen to interviews with him, one interview I'd recommend listening to with Howard Finkel, since he's passed away, is WWE in 2014. I believe they were doing this the 30 years of WrestleMania special, and Renee Young would host it, and she had Howard Finkel on, and he was amazing. He was an amazing host. He really went into how much it meant to him, how important it was to him that he was the first employee signed to the WWE. He was hired in 1975 by Vince McMahon Sr. in what was known then as the WWF. He's one of the few people who's been there through all three transitions, WWF, WWF, WWE. He's been through every era, every generation, and I think there's at least maybe two to three generations who grew up with Howard Finkel's voice. In the 80s, the 90s, and the early 2000s, everyone knows that high-pitched, classic ring announcing voice. It's so iconic now. The way he'd introduce some of our favorite stars, he was just awesome. Who can forget? I don't know who my favorite ones. I like the way he would say Stone Cold Steve Austin at high. I can't do it right, but at high pitched voice. I can't do it justice, so I won't try. It was really, really great. And just hearing the Fink's voice would make you really excited, because when you hear the Fink really get into it, when you hear that high pitched voice announcing a major match like the Royal Rumble or the main event of WrestleMania, you will get really excited. The guy was just great at his job. We call him the Fink, Howard Finkel. Everyone would call him the Fink. Even more interviews you can listen back to him. Such a gentle man, such a really, really nice guy. When you look at everything, when he started in the 70s, he was the ring announcer at Madison Square Garden in 1977, and then he became the leading ring announcer, and he would introduce the talent. His voice is really distinctive. That, of course, made him really popular. I'm not sure if this is true. Okay, I think so. I think he came up with the name WrestleMania. He might not have. I don't know if it was Vince. I've heard stories that Vince McMahon was inspired by the Beatles. Like Beatlemania would come in, so they called it WrestleMania as their version. But I'm pretty sure it was him. He got the WrestleMania name. That's insane. He is probably the only guy who appeared in every WrestleMania. He has to have the most WrestleMania appearances, not matches, but appearances he has to have the most. He was at every single WrestleMania, and he talked about how much that meant to him. And up until 32, I believe. I think they had his voice on PA later when he was in really poor health condition, but he was at every WrestleMania. What the Fink would do was, in his later years, once he was off TV, they would have him do a great job in which he would announce the Hall of Fame each year. And if you go back to that interview, that podcast, that really means a lot to him. He really wanted to host the Hall of Fame. He would not host the Hall of Fame. He would announce, I made a mistake. Not the Hall of Fame events. I mean the Hall of Fame when they come over at WrestleMania, when they have him on the stars on the stage. He would announce it, and he was really, really great at it. It meant a lot to him just seeing his face being there each year. I know one of his good friends was Mean Gene Okerlund, who passed away last year, and of course Mean Gene's one of the great backstage interviewers. Those two are the best. It's such a lost art, both of them are so good at what they did. You'll never find a better ring announcer than Howard Finkel. You're never going to find a better backstage announcer than Mean Gene. And of course, they both passed away in back-to-back years. Both of them were just great at what they did. And I think they were both at the Legends host. That show, it's so sad to look back on it because so many stars have passed away. Roddy Piper was there as well. He passed away. That's really sad when you go back and watch that, or at least try to watch it. Oh man, I don't want to watch it. It's very sad looking back. It's tough. This has been a very hard week for the WWE in particular. A lot of the stars are really reacting to it on Twitter. You feel bad for them. Howard Finkel was eventually inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2009. He was inducted by Mean Gene Okerlund. He had an amazing Hall of Fame speech in which at the end he inducts himself in his voice into the WWE Hall of Fame. That was great. The one thing that annoyed a lot of people, this is true, I hate to be negative, but his Hall of Fame video package, they made him look like a joke. I hated when they did that to him. He had such a great career with them. He was there for so long. He was there for 34 years at that point. He had such a historic run with them. And what they do is, with this video package, they basically make him like as this goofy comedy character. He was in numerous storylines with Lillian Garcia. That was funny, but that's how they made him his career come off as. It's sad because a younger generation isn't going to know how great of an announcer he was when they did that. So I was very disappointed when WWE did that stupid video package. I really hated it. I hope they apologized to him because they really should have made him to be as much bigger of a deal, because that's how much he meant to the business. He was just an iconic announcer for the company. He was the voice of a lot of our childhoods. I remember the Fink's voice growing up. It was probably one of the first voices I heard. I've been watching wrestling for 20 years. Who doesn't know the Fink's voice? It's such it's really sad. So I think near the end of his run, 2006, they would have him more as a backstage role. He was never left the company. I don't believe so. I believe he was with the company the entire time. They would have him do announcing on old school episodes of Raw. I think Survivor Series in 2011, CM Punk had Howard Finkel introduce him to the match against Alberto Del Rio, and that was in Madison Square Garden. That was really cool by Punk. In 2012, he appeared on the Blast from the Past episode of SmackDown. Also in 2012, he was a special guest ring announcer on the 1000th episode of Monday Night Raw. 2014, of course, that's when he does Legends host. I believe that was actually shot in 2012. I'm not sure. And he was announcing into the Hall of Fame, doing it every year at WrestleMania, as I mentioned, since they brought it back. WrestleMania 20 to 33, that's when he did it. Or sorry, to 32. I think in 2017 is once they had other people do it, because that's when he was in such poor health, and it became a situation where he couldn't physically be there. I'm sure he was at WrestleMania. I'm sure he was there, and he was in poor condition. Maybe they even had him on camera sometimes so he could appear at every single one. But in this stage of the game, unfortunately, he could not appear on that on WrestleMania going forward. And I hate to bring this up. I remember hearing stories. That's when I knew that he was in really poor health. And back in 2016, at 32, his last appearance at WrestleMania, I heard stories. I was having trouble getting in and out of the ring. That's really sad. He would sometimes do stuff on the network. I think he was on Edge and Christian show, and he came. I think the last time I heard his voice was in 2018, 2 years ago, on the 25th anniversary of Raw. I think he was the announcer he was the announcer who introduced The Undertaker to come out when I think they were in a smaller arena, and I think it was a recording though, so we still got to hear his voice. And you even hear stories from wrestlers talking about visiting him in the last few years of his life. He would still have the windpipes. He can still do it, and that's really cool. Him, man, wow, it's just really, really sad. Such an icon, any wrestling fan, even if you're young, you watch tapes, that voice. That voice is so iconic. It's such a high pitched voice, and no one can do it better than what he did. And to end this, I just want to say he was one of the greatest ring announcers of all time, if not the best. He was a WWE Hall of Famer, and we will miss this man. I, along with many other wrestling fans, would like to thank Howard Finkel for being the voice of my childhood. We're going to miss you, Fink. Rest in peace.